We recently learned that Ultimate Sharen is coming to the game, and with that comes some changes to her kit. So let's have a little real talk about Sharen, shall we? No hype for the sake of hyping. No, this is going to break the game, clickbait. Just unfiltered thoughts on what's working, what's not, and what I hope these changes will bring to her playstyle. Here's what we know. Her kit is getting an adjustment, possibly an overhaul. Now here's why this matters. Most who have played Sharen fall into one of two categories. You found her extremely underwhelming, or she's one of your favorites. I'm in the second group, but Sharen has her struggles. I know this because I've spent way too much time with her, and while I can't say I have a main, she's about as close as it gets for me. I know her strengths, I know her weaknesses, and I know her quirks. So when I hear about changes, my mind starts spinning. What's getting better? What's staying the same? And what should change? Now, before we jump into my wish list for Sharen 2.0, let me say this. I don't claim to have all the answers. Love these ideas? Great. Hate them? That's fine too. What matters is that we're having this conversation, because when Sharen hits the battlefield in Season 2, she's going to look and feel different. And we all want her to land in a good place, right?
Tux makes it exciting!
The devs said this on their official Discord Q&A channel. And I quote, "We're currently working on the shorts video for Ultimate Sharen. I got a sneak peek and it looked amazing. You'll likely be able to see it around next weekend. Stay tuned." I guess we're talking about Thanksgiving weekend. We might see some more on Ultimate Sharen. You know, there's something I've been wrestling with, and I wonder if anybody else out there feels the same. Back in the early days, I couldn't decide who my favorite Descendant was. It was always this back and forth between Freyna and Sharen, but I naturally gravitated towards Sharen because of her tactical gameplay style. And yet, every time I switched over to Freyna, the debate in my head started all over again. So when the devs announced Ultimate Freyna, I was stoked, and I couldn't wait to see how they'd rework her. But here's the twist. Now that Ultimate Freyna is here, I barely use her, and she's arguably the strongest Descendant in the game. The devs completely ruined Freyna for me. Before her rework, she wasn't perfect, sure, but because Bunny set the bar, they tuned her according to that. Now, using her takes the fun out of the game. It feels brainless and boring, and that's a massive letdown for someone who used to love playing Freyna. That's why I'm making this video. I don't want that to happen to Sharen, or to any other Descendant for that matter. Every rework doesn't need to turn into a power grab. We don't need every character to be overtuned, because strength without engaging gameplay is meaningless, and they're not going to be able to retune the dungeons every time they rework a Descendant. I want Sharen to stay unique, engaging, and rewarding, not just another overpowered character that ends up making the content boring. I feel like that's a marketing stunt. So yeah, this isn't just a breakdown of potential changes for Sharen, it's also a plea to keep what makes her special intact. Let's not lose her identity chasing numbers. What's Sharen's defining thing? Every Descendant has one, right? We probably all agree it's her stealth, but it's more than just disappearing. It's how her power ties directly into it. Her invisibility pairs with her ambush skill and her passive Assassinator to deliver some insane burst damage from all sources. Here's where it really gets interesting. When she gets a kill while in her ambush state, her active camouflage resets. That's the good part. But here's the catch. The second she strikes, whether it's with a weapon or a skill, her cloak disengages. That means her massive damage buff is only going to apply to one hit. One bullet, one skill cast, one attack. So to make the most of it, that one hit needs to really count. Now, the big question, can she solo the hardest content in the game? Short answer, absolutely. She has a role in every major challenge the first Descendant throws at you, and she does it exceptionally well. She can solo void bosses in seconds. She's valuable in team compositions. She thrives in special ops and invasions. Even in her current pre-buff state, Sharen can solo 400% dungeons without really breaking a sweat. When it comes to tactical strikes, she's devastatingly effective against mini bosses and commanders. Thanks to her ambush damage bonus, plus something like the Afterglow sword, she can take them down quicker than almost anyone. And because she's so evasive, she can do it without taking much heat herself. Not to exaggerate, but she makes 400% dungeons easier than using Glay, Lepic, or Haley. Sure, She's not as fast or efficient as Freyna, no one is, but Sharen still holds her own. So yeah, that's Sharen in her current form. But here's the thing, Sharen's greatest strength is also her biggest limitation. Let's start with the obvious, her cloaking. If her core advantage is invisibility, it's ridiculous that void bosses can see her. You still get the damage bonus from ambush, but you're not actually fooling anyone. You're cloaked and still eating laser beams. Dumb, right? The devs probably worry about scenarios where 4 Sharens gang up on a boss that can't find its target. That's fair, but there's got to be a middle ground. Maybe bosses have reduced accuracy while she's cloaked, something that preserves the stealth fantasy without breaking encounters. Then there's the other half of her problem. Her kit only empowers a single strike. While that one strike hits hard, it makes her whole playstyle feel limiting, especially when you're dealing with waves of enemies. It's not just tedious, it's restrictive. Think about it, her damage bonus only benefits one shot. So most weapons, about 95% of them, don't work with her kit. Now, I hate comparing everyone to Freyna or Bunny, but let's face it, they set the bar. Freyna tosses out a single skill, stands there, filing her nails, and boom, half the room is gone. She doesn't even need to shoot. Is that boring? I think so, sure. But you can't argue, it's insanely efficient. Is that a Sharen problem? Not entirely, it's also a Freyna problem, which, to the devs' credit, they're reportedly addressing. That's a topic for another day. But here's what I'd love to see for Sharen. Let her cloak stay active during attacks. Maybe this comes in the form of a new module, but it could open up her gameplay and make her more versatile. Imagine running an LMG staying cloaked and dealing some ambush damage for a set duration. Make it so critical hits extend her cloaking and ambush duration. As long as you're hitting your shots and landing crits, you'd stay cloaked and keep your damage rolling and allow for more sustained damage output. It would also streamline her gameplay loop. We've seen this kind of mechanics before. Haley's Frostwatcher and Albion's Cavalry both thrive on similar mechanics where sustained actions keep their buffs active, cutting out unnecessary steps and letting her perform better in groups. And for solo play, her clear times would likely improve by 30%, maybe more. Sharen has a strong foundation, but her current kit feels overly rigid. Expanding how her cloaking works without sacrificing her identity would make her a stronger, more balanced option in both solo and group scenarios. It's not about breaking her, it's about unleashing her potential. Let's take a moment here, because does anyone else feel like Sharen is basically a walking homage to the Predator? Her cloaking ability, it's straight out of the Predator's playbook. Then there's the energy-based weapon concept, which feels like it was ripped right out of the Predator's iconic plasma caster. And her melee swords, if you've ever seen those scenes where the Predator pulls out its wrist blades for some up-close carnage, you'll know exactly what I mean. Even the visuals feel like a nod. Have you noticed the red targeting system when you're lining up your void domination strikes? It's not quite the Predator's iconic 3-dot laser sight, but it's close enough to trigger some serious nostalgia. Whether intentional or not, the parallels are hard to ignore. And honestly, it works for me. It gives her this unique, almost primal edge that sets her apart from the other Descendants. She's not a run and gun character. She's a hunter, tactical, lethal, and entirely unforgiving. Her playstyle revolves around isolating targets, planning her attacks, and executing them with devastating efficiency. So what if they enhanced her kit, but keep the core concept as the Huntress? Here's an idea: letting players deal sustained damage without constantly breaking her stealth. It would significantly improve her flow, particularly in high pressure scenarios. Let's talk about kit enhancements. Here's what Sharen could really use. The windup for her Void Domination swords feels a bit too long, especially in high pressure situations. It needs to be snappier. Cut the animation time down so she can unleash those devastating strikes faster. And while we're at it, give her a quick release option too. A simple double tap of the ability button could throw the swords without needing to lock onto specific enemies. This would add flexibility, letting players aim freely when there's no time to pick targets. Her sword throws, at the very least, they should pierce through multiple enemies, especially trash mobs. And suddenly, Sharen's AoE potential goes through the roof. Of course, balance is key, so to avoid making this mechanic overpowered, there could be limits. For example, a cap on the number of enemies a sword can penetrate, or diminishing damage for each subsequent hit. But the concept is simple. Reward good positioning and precision by letting Sharen devastate clustered enemies. Now this is important because as it stands, there's no real benefit to hitting tightly grouped targets aside from the fact they're easier to aim at. There's no splash damage, no status effects, nothing to make those groups feel like an opportunity instead of just a task. Adding a small AoE status effect or debuff, like a shock, bleed, or slow on nearby enemies would fix this. It wouldn't just make her swords more powerful, it would make them smarter and far more satisfying to use. This change would give Sharen more tools for dealing with hordes, improving her crowd control capabilities, without undermining her role as a precision-based assassin. It's not about making her swords overpowered. It's about ensuring they feel impactful and rewarding to use. The devs did say she is getting more AoE power. I hope something like this is considered. Without a Transcendant mod, up to 3 swords can strike a single target, which in my mind leaves damage on the table. The Void Domination module currently enhances her sword throws to hit 20 enemies, up from 10, and up to 2 swords per enemy, down from 3. This should be her default. Then bump that up to 30 targets, and we're talking about a Sharen who truly lives up to her potential as a crowd-clearing tactical assassin. Modules can then build upon this rather than feeling like a mandatory upgrade, because right now the Void Domination mod feels like that. It feels like you have to use it. Their other mods are pretty cool too, but because of the content, you need the Void Domination mod to keep up. They did mention 360-degree sword throws, and if that is what it sounds like, a spinning AoE attack that doesn't miss anyone in a circle, then count me in. Sharen has always had the tools to deal with groups, but this could take her crowd control to the next level. The question is, will it have enough oomph to justify the animation time? In easier content, this doesn't matter, but in those 400% infiltrations, which I feel like set the bar for the kind of content somebody like Sharen should be good at, it's very difficult for Sharen to send out those swords uncloaked. Because of her wind-up time and pose, it's nearly impossible in the harder dungeons. Haley has this icy blowback on her storm snare. You know what I'm talking about? It pushes the enemies back. It puts a slow on them too. Well, Sharen should have something like that too. When Sharen is winding up her Void Domination swords, enemies nearby should feel that heat, and I mean literally. Add a small area of effect shock or stun effect to her wind-up phase, giving her a bit of breathing room against mobs. And if enemies try to rush her while she's posed in that kind of scorpion pose thing, they should get shocked. This would make her feel powerful in chaotic fights while adding utility to her kit. Cloaking is her bread and butter, but activating it takes too long. Sharen isn't exactly a tank, so standing there for even a second longer than necessary can get her killed. Cutting the activation time in half would let her slip into stealth mode more fluidly, keeping her alive and dangerous. Also, stealth isn't just for hiding, it's for positioning. Sharen's movement speed should get a bump while cloaked, allowing her to maximize her invisibility window. Whether it's flanking enemies, grabbing consumables, or closing the gap to deliver a devastating ambush strike, faster movement would make her feel more fluid and responsive. Only skill kills during the ambush state resets cloaking. This is one of Sharen's biggest issues. She's amazing with precision-based firearms. Her kit practically screams, pick up that sniper and go to town. But the problem is that unless you're landing skill kills during her ambush state, you're not resetting her cloaking. It creates this weird dynamic where you feel like you're being punished for doing what should be her bread and butter, delivering precision headshot strikes with that sniper. This undermines her identity as a stealth assassin. Instead of rewarding sharpshooting and tactical gameplay, the system nudges you towards relying solely on her skills for cloaking resets. It's like the game is saying, why use that beautiful aimed sniper shot when you could just toss out a skill instead? And when you have 400 enemies rushing you, that cloaking reset is the difference between life and death. Here's why this is such a problem. Precision-based weapons feel suboptimal in the hordes because they don't feed into her stealth loop. This leaves players pigeonholed into builds that rely on skills rather than letting them lean into the fantasy of Sharen as a deadly marksman. When your cloak drops after a single weapon kill, you're forced to wait or rely on a skill kill to reset it, but it breaks the fluidity of her gameplay loop, making her feel less agile and less in control compared to other Descendants with smoother mechanics. Sharen's ambush is all about striking hard and fast while invisible. Weapon kills should complement this, but instead they feel penalized. You're spending time lining up the perfect shot, only to lose your stealth advantage and have to start over. God forbid you miss that shot. A simple solution? Make precision firearm kills during ambush reset her cloaking, just like skill kills do. Here's how it could work. Headshot kills reset cloaking. Landing a headshot with any weapon while in ambush would reset the cloaking cooldown. If headshot kills feel too restrictive to certain weapon types, critical kills could also reduce the cooldown significantly. For example, a crit kill might have 50% off the cooldown. Maybe they grant a small extension to ambush duration or boost her crit multiplier while cloaked. This change would completely transform how Sharen feels to play. Suddenly, her weapon choices would open up and precision strikes would feel rewarding instead of punishing. The gameplay loop would become smoother, letting players seamlessly alternate between cloaking, skills, and weapon kills without breaking the flow. And if Sharen can lob shock nuts, her stun effect while cloaked would make her far more versatile. Wow, a lot of people don't even know this skill exists because it's not talked about much, but it's amazing for mobbing. If you're mobbing solo, you throw that orb out there, her shock nuts, and everybody just stands still for you so that you can land headshots. It's a tactical move that aligns perfectly with her playstyle and would allow her to be more precise with her headshots from her sniper or hand cannon at close ranges while cloaked. But if you're cloaked, when you throw out her shock nuts, then you become uncloaked, so it feels like a penalty. But if you remove that, then this would encourage smarter, more creative gameplay. And I don't think it would make her overpowered either because it's a step-by-step mechanic, so you'd have to go cloak, throw out her shock nuts, line up your shot, and pull the trigger, right? So similarly, Sharen's melee strikes, like her #1 skill, shouldn't pull her out of stealth. This would be a true predator mode. Breaking stealth to slice is counterintuitive for someone built around being an invisible assassin. So allowing her to stay cloaked while using melee attacks would expand her build options and reinforce her role as a close quarters hunter. It's high risk to play melee, so this playstyle should be more rewarded. Speaking of which, I think there should be a duration mode for her cutoff beam, turning it into a slice and dice primary weapon. In the Q&A on Discord, the devs stated this, I quote, "Introducing a Descendant who uses melee weapons like swords is one of my personal dreams as well. Whether it would be a Descendant with sword abilities or the introduction of a new weapon system hasn't been decided yet, but it's definitely on my wish list for the future." This could be that Descendant. Also, Sharen should boost weapon crit potential. Whether this comes as a passive aura or a synergy tied to her ambush, increasing weapon crit chance for herself would help expand her as a weapon platform. Something like 20% would be great. So why does any of this matter? Well, these changes wouldn't make Sharen overpowered. They'd make her more efficient and enjoyable to play. All would enhance her role as a tactical high-skilled assassin. These updates would keep her relevant in group play, boost her solo potential, and make her an even more compelling choice for players who crave precision and tactical playstyles. But here's what I hope the devs don't do: overcomplicate her. Sharen's appeal has always been her elegance. She's flashy, but she's focused. Her abilities should work together seamlessly and not feel like a disjointed mess of do this, then that, but only if X happens. Keep her simple, keep her powerful, and then let her shine. But in order for the community to adopt the ultimate Sharen, love her, and use her all season, we need to make sure we address her real issues, those intricate little details, as she's being applied to the content that the community enjoys playing the most. So what do you hope to see from Sharen's rework? Is there something you need her kit to have to make her a mainstay in your lineup? Drop your comments below because I'll be reading, responding, and maybe stealing your best ideas for the next video. All right, that's all I got for you today. I hope you found this helpful or at least mildly entertaining. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. Until then, keep grinding, keep experimenting, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for hanging out with me. My name is Tuxedo Bandido. That's Tito Bandido.
One and only.
And this was another episode of The First Descendant. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, like, and turn on notifications to ensure you don't miss out on the fantastic experiences waiting for you in The First Descendant. And if you like videos like this, check out the one I have recommended for you right here. If you have anything you want to see covered, be sure to let me know in the comments below. And thank you to all the channel members and donors who make everything possible. Tux Nation wouldn't be without you.
When you buy or download anything for The First Descendant, be sure to use Tux's creator code to support the channel. Easy peasy.
Follow me.